All right, so last I checked, we have 3 of the 4 limbs to give to Windy the Wall.
And I need to state that I made a mistake in talking about Luis Buñuel movies last time. The movie's titled The Phantom of Liberty. I apologize to my fellow film snobs.
I thought the mistake was you bringing it up in the context of Y2K, but I guess...
Frankly, trying to connect anything to this strange hodgepodge is almost assuredly asking for disaster, but yet here we are.
We actually came across this area a couple of episodes ago, and then I promptly got intimidated, turned around, and walked away.
Which is... Which is fair, considering that sort of nonsense is what happens, apparently.
No, that was entirely my fault, but still, I thought it was kind of funny. Anyway, so we've got these giant masks, and I guess they blow air everywhere, set to a wonderful backdrop of what looks like ACDOS? You saw that, right? That's what it said?
Yeah, or ADOS it looks like, because the texture appears to be repeating on the floor as well as the wall.
It wasn't doing that a minute ago. That might be a glitch.
Until we get out of this task manager, I'm not really sure what else we're going to be able to talk about in context of this specific dungeon. Unless you have any other insights.
Let's talk about how good I am at LP talk.
Oh, those are some masterful dodges.
It doesn't even matter. Guy, I just love how it doesn't matter at all.
It matters not a bit.
I took a minute to recover because I'm not used to people actually surviving LP toss at this point.
Which is fair.
But Rollerbot is too fast.
I will say, too, that as far as enemy designs, he's probably one of the most generic we've seen thus far.
Yeah, he's like a discount Wally, right?
Yeah. I'm trying to think if there was an Earthbound robot that looked kind of like that, and...
He kind of reminds me of Rob, actually talking about retro video games.
Yeah, I can see it. Sort of with the very specific head shape and like the ratio of how far apart his eyes are.
I was going to say the treads as well, but you're right. Let's just go ahead and polish this off.
Yeah, the treads are more really implied by current generation designs of Rob that appear in the likes of Super Smash Bros. Games, as the original one was just a mount for its many, many batteries.
Oh, I didn't know that. I wasn't enough of a geek to have my own robotic operating buddy.
Well, that's why you have me around.
I guess it is. For better or worse. I'm sure you're starting to see the gimmick of this, that being that we have to control these fans in such a way that we can point the magic carpet to wherever we want to go. What kind of tripped me up here at first is that the magic carpet seems to follow its own path on the forward and return trips. Like, you need to basically activate the fan so the forward trip works, but the return trip will work regardless.
Ah. Yeah, because I would think that if you were to just hit that switch from here, nothing would happen, because if you're going on the same route, then it would just blow you back to where you started. Except it's doing this circuitous thing instead.
Well, yeah, that's sort of what tripped me up about it, because I remember back in the first dungeon that we did when we were trying to get out of Hotel Sammy, where we had to use Dolly to hit the remote switches in a situation that was very similar to this one, where we were riding the magic carpets everywhere.
Right.
It almost strikes me as something where maybe they caught this in playtesting, and if they did any playtesting, good for them. But maybe this could have been a lot more complicated if the objective was to hit switches remotely and then have you take the same path forward and reverse for all the magic carpets.
Yeah, as it stands, the relative linearity of it is actually kind of a minor blessing, in my opinion, because then you don't really have to deal with trying to figure out the abstract layout of all of the switches for moving the magic carpets, as well as the switches for changing the direction of any of the... Well, that was an attempt.
Yeah, that sure was something, wasn't it? I think I forgot that I was doing the minigame. I was just trying to press A as fast as possible to rush through it.
I'm sure discount wind-up Devil Mega Man appreciates the one extra turn for me to comment on his appearance.
Huh, I didn't even think about that. I guess you're probably right. I guess what kind of strikes me as the weirdest thing about this entire room, and kind of indicative of the Essentia's Mind Dungeon in general, is like, everything's really spread out, right?
Yeah.
And being spread out is not necessarily a bad thing, because it gives you like a sense of scale. I guess what bothers me about everything being spread out is that it doesn't need to be so spread out, you know? If your goal is to make sure that you just can't do jumps, well, Alex can't do jumps. That problem's already been solved. Maybe they just want you to kind of see the background here and like be able to kind of drink in the flavor of this room.
Right, but at this point, from what you're pointing out, it's true. We've seen roughly 3 dungeons worth of individual puzzle mechanics in the space of this just one really long one, and that honestly the game's pacing probably would have been helped by a little bit more restraint on the part of what we're going to run into for any one dungeon.
Yeah, I'm getting real tired of the Essentia 2000's Task Manager. I'd like to move on to something else, thanks.
Well, I suppose that would be a kind of monkey's paw wish as far as I've seen, because at the very least, with these all being spread out, we're not being subjected to more Allenson prose.
Oh, we'll get there, believe me. That being the case, I wouldn't want to keep you from it, so let's just skip the about, I think it was something like 4 minutes of me just figuring out how the rest of these switches are supposed to work. So you may remember this area kind of over on the side that we went to first. This allows us to activate not just one, but 2 of these weird mask things and get us to another platform kind of over on the right.
Right.
I thought maybe I could tag that switch. I genuinely have no idea how you're supposed to get over there now.
I think you would have, based on the fact that you were saying that the route is the same going back regardless of whether or not there's a mask blowing in your way, that you would hit the switch for that specific mask, go back across it, and then when you take the same platform again, you're able to make it that time.
Oh yeah, you're absolutely right. And we did go there earlier. We went there at the beginning of the dungeon to get access to that one that we just hit. So now we can hit the center switch and use those switches that we just hit to get all the way over to this new area, follow it all the way over here to this final chest, and the switch that we need to hit to get the hell out of here.
Alright, I was bracing myself for that to be a mimic again, but... That was a decent sound effect, though. I'll give it that.
I actually got caught off guard by that. He replicates my enthusiasm perfectly.
I feel like that scream of particular shock is not necessarily it's not necessarily indicative of the kind of experience one might have playing YIIK outside of the very specific instances of something kind of terrible happening. This game, if I had to summarize it in the form of a single exclamatory yell, would probably be, I
didn't know you were so into onomatopoeias.
Well, when you study Japanese, you kind of have to develop a passion for those.
I guess you do. I hadn't really even thought about that.
There's a considerable amount of onomatopoeia in Japanese, including my personal favorite, the one for total silence. ... Yeah, pretty much. It is in fact the character G.
G?
Yes, it's meant to replicate the sound of what's the term? Like the sound of tinnitus. That's the one.
Oh.
Where when it's completely silent and nobody's saying everything, there's just a very small, high-pitched whine inside your ears.
Well, that's only if you were exposed to loud noises and or rock concerts growing up.
I don't know how true that is of Japanese youth, but apparently it's not uncommon to imagine the sound of total silence as being this very small, high-pitched whining noise.
I always imagine the sound of silence as Depeche Mode. All right, the lady of the hour. This is actually an interesting effect. I like that they hop around the keyboard a little bit. It makes it feel a little bit less static.
Yeah, that's fair. It just kind of snapped a little quickly, I thought, so...
Yeah, it did.
Again, that's just me kind of grasping at straws to try and criticize this game, admittedly.
You may also have noticed that that was a cameo from the two brothers who ended up on the first episode's thing for Frankton, where they, like, sort of do the giant walk around before they say Frankton.
Ah.
I thought that was kind of an interesting reuse of art assets. Anyway, isn't it interesting how Nyla Elamine has many of the same experiences as Vela does with regards to men?
I don't know that there was this supposition that Vela was ever fearful of someone that she was in a relationship with. There's that sound again.
She was never fearful, I guess. Just her luck has been poor. The way I sort of read this is that because these are sort of, they're sort of like parallel lives of the Essentia 2000, maybe they sort of weirdly share the same fate / general path of life. Probably.
Yeah.
Don't lose your day job, Wendy.
Well, you know, far be it from us to attempt to dissuade someone from making these life choices.
Yeah.
I mean, we decided to play this game. What right do we have to judge?
Well, I wish there was maybe another way of doing this. Let's go ahead and level up before we get into yet another part of this dungeon I'm not really looking forward to.
Hotline Miami build, go!
Yep, and this time I'm actually putting a lot of points into speed, because over the past, like, hour and a half of dungeon crawling, it's become increasingly obvious to me that my speed stat is the only thing that really matters. I mean, at this point, we have no idea whether we're going to get our friends back, right?
Right.
Who's going to tank for me? The Essentia? She doesn't do that. We've actually gotten a ton of XP.
And that obviously means quite a bit of walking around, so...
And a multiple of 5.
Did you find out the question, Alex?
Oh, Dr. Aryabhata.
If this man just said game over, yeah, with great enthusiasm, I think I'd enjoy him quite a bit more.
Do any damn thing right! Get out! Get out of my face!
True ending achieved.
I hate you! I hate you so much!
I have to give it to the voice actor. He's clearly having fun with this.
He's going to be picking scenery out of his teeth for weeks.
Who are you to vex me with your perpetual idiocracy?
Hey, don't diss that. That was a good movie.
Don't you dare run unless you find the question! Silly, pathetic, worthless.
Can I just say how great it would have been if he just broke into a caw at the end there?
Yes. Really remind us of who we're dealing with. I will say, Marlene is another character who's probably wasted in this game.
Yeah, no, Marlene's voice actor clearly is, like, this is clearly below his pay grade. But apparently this game actually has, like, a bunch of really good voice actors.
I mean, we've explored that a little bit.
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit at the beginning, but still, some of these people are clearly having more fun with this project than others.
We might look forward to the peasantry finally getting their revenge on Alex, so there's that.
This definitely filled me with a sense of dread and unease, but probably not for the reasons the game wanted to fill me with a sense of dread and unease.
If we need to read Alex's book report on the French Revolution, then I don't know if I'm here for that.
I'm also not here for a 3-page essay on the significance of the guillotine and the Scarlet Letter or whatever. You have to cut the rope, Alex.
Well,
I was not able to cut the rope.
I was somewhat concerned for a moment there that the answer would have been to guillotine the cat, because then I'd say, well, now I understand why someone would have had to throw up from stress upon completing this dungeon.
No, Dolly is the... I don't want to hurt Dolly. Dolly is like the light of my Y2K life.
As we've explored, this game has at least a few bright spots, which it also seems determined to take away from us.
At first I thought my game froze because that took so long to play the little Zelda sound.
Yeah.
Chances are we got another one here, and I was right.
Because, heaven forbid, this dungeon be cut short.
Yep, can't have that. Apparently that doesn't work either.
Alright.
We have to do this the right way.
So let's see. As far as, well, particulars of dungeon design, I don't know, would you think of can you think offhand of an RPG dungeon that you did think actually had a fairly well-inspired design by comparison?
It depends on what variety of RPG we're talking about. Are we talking about strictly JRPG type things like this, or are we kind of broadening our horizons?
Well, now I'm curious as to what you might consider as being broadly an RPG.
I was going to say something like the Future City in Borderlands 2.
Ah,
The one where you have to go around and do all the tour stuff because it's like a city designed specifically to be a source of propaganda for Handsome Jack.
yeah, that's a pretty good one.
Yeah, I thought that was a pretty nifty idea, or at least like a pretty cool gimmick as far as dungeons go. I guess I really like dungeons that are not traditional dungeons. I guess I'm sort of a fan of the same thing in tabletop RPGs.
Yeah, that's absolutely fair. I'm somewhat struggling to think of a specific example that jumps out at me at this point.
Of a non-traditional dungeon.
Yeah, or at least an RPG dungeon that has some kind of a curious gimmick to it in terms of puzzle design or layout or what have you.
That's a good question, actually. I can think of a couple other ones from JRPGs specifically that I thought were kind of interesting. Do you remember Welgaia from Tales of Symphonia, the Angel City?
I do not.
Oh, it was a really interesting kind of like future city, but everything is totally abandoned and really creepy. I thought that was a neat one.
I'm thinking in terms of actual puzzle design. What stood out to me was a couple of the trial dungeons from Tales of Zestiria. Even if I didn't particularly like that game, I certainly admit that a couple of the sort of elemental-focused dungeons had some pretty curious elements to them.
Gosh, I never played that game.
I
I kind of want to. Anything to get away from having to execute this person.
I will say it's a pretty hard sell as far as a Tales game goes. If you liked the likes of Symphonia, then I can't recommend it without at least a few qualifiers.
I think it would be somewhat disingenuous to say I liked Tales of Symphonia. It definitely kind of wears its welcome out. It's about, 3 times as long as it needs to be. Oh, isn't that pleasant? Oh, gross.
So, at this point, I have to ask, what does the motif of an execution really have to do with any element of the Essentia or Nalia or Vela's psyche at this point?
That's a good question, and it's one I'm happy that you asked, because I don't know. I think this is a bug.
Huh.
Yeah, that's where it's supposed to go. Oh, believe me, game. I felt empty inside long before I got to this particular puzzle.
We can only fill the void with cider and references to other games.
So, I guess we have to go and fetch another victim. I thought maybe there was another one over here that we missed, but unfortunately nobody else wants to talk to us.
Such is our lot.
Yeah, well, we've got a whole other room to explore, right? I'm sure we can find somebody there who's willing to take the initiative?
Well, I will say that I'm pretty glad that you found an interesting trick there with using the skateboard to avoid the poison pool.
I will do everything in my power not to have the game suck life points away from me, thank you very much. I had enough of that when we were in Mount Mixtape.
Though that does beg the very interesting question of, is the Essentia 2000 affected by the poison pool?
That's a good question, actually. At this point, I kind of just totally wrote her off, because, by this point, it literally does not matter to me whether or not the Essentia is alive, because Alex is able to solo this dungeon with Elpitos.
Right.
I didn't even think to check.
Well, I will say that the nature of the hacky game design suggests to me that yes, but for someone who's able to put in a level of detail that apparently Axe Studios occasionally manages to hit, but more consistently than not fails at, I would be somewhat understanding if they did manage to put in a very specific condition of the Essentia 2000 is not affected by a poison pool.
What is the rationale behind the poison pool anyway? I mean, I know we're totally overthinking this, but we're about 30 episodes in, so that's nothing new. But what is the reason that walking over purple slime is supposed to sap your health?
Because it's an RPG, and RPGs have that, and it's just kind of like
It's like a convention.
It's a nod to the likes of Dragon Quest and RPGs that just have to have some kind of environmental hazard as a means of artificially inflating the difficulty of a level by saying, oh, regardless of circumstances, you're going to have to expect to take damage going through some of these parts.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. I kind of grew up more on the variety of poison in RPGs where, it doesn't even matter. Like Pokemon, where it's just, 1 hit point per turn, and you've got, 200 or 300 or whatever. But then I started playing stuff like Darkest Dungeon, and poison wrecked my day.
Sure does. The likes of Shin Megami Tensei titles, for instance, as well, have some pretty aggressive poison. And I forget. I think someone's playing Magi Nation on the forums right now, and I forget what the assessment of poison was in that game.
I don't even remember. I think another game didn't the Disgaea games actually have pretty serious poison? Like couldn't poison mess you up in those games?
Yeah, in part because poison was percentage of health based, and so when you get
That
up
was
to
it.
when you get up to oh, here we go.
I thought I achieved the true ending, but no, this is how you're supposed to do it.
Nope. We just gotta keep going.
I'm definitely putting a sensitive content warning on top of this one. But before I do that, let's go ahead and save.
It would be absolutely hilarious if it did not give you the option to save because you can't do anything with the phone when you don't have a head.
Oh man, that would be funny. Mode Wondershot, you're too clever for this game.
I think we both are. Let's see how much more clever we can get.